Yes, grand rising. When I say grand rising, I'm speaking to your spirit, to your mind, to your physical, to all of the areas in which you operate, right? Speaking to all of that. So, grand rising, family. You thought I wasn't going to come right back? Nah, you're not going to hide me out here. Like, oh, yeah, nah, he missed this day. Nah, right back. So, we're going to be right back on track right now. So, we're going to get into social control theory. And just to prove to you that I'm not even worried about the social media or whatever, I'll post this later. But if you're tuning in, let me know where you're tuning in from. Let me know what books you would like for me to read next. Let me know what you've learned from Blueprint for Black Power. Also, what has most interested you thus far or stood out the most to you? I hope you're having a great day, and I hope this is a great start to your day. I appreciate you joining me, and whatever you do for me and for others, may the ancestors return that favor to you 10,000 fold. Ashe. Let's hop right in. Social control theory. Consciousness is an instrument of social control. Consciousness is a psychophysiological control mechanism. It is an instrument of behavioral control. Through its states and levels, humans control their mental, physical, and emotional behavior. However, consciousness can be socialized, meaning that its defining functional contents, methods of processing and expressing information, its guiding values and parameters, are deeply influenced and conditioned by the nature and consistency of our interactions with other human beings and the various social conditions under which we live. In other words, the consciousness that directs the individual's behavior is to a great degree under social control and is used as a means of controlling his behavior by the culture, society, and groups of which he is a member and under whose influence he operates. Consciousness is therefore the premier instrument of social control. Consequently, its contents, character, abilities, and intentions are the object of social concern and social engineering. To control consciousness is to control behavior, or at least to limit its possibilities. The character and level of consciousness is related to the degree to which it is controlled by its host, by others, and by non-human circumstances. Wakeful consciousness represents the highest levels of mental and physical integration. It is reflective of, or is characterized by, the highest levels of self-awareness, i.e., awareness of our own mental activity, awareness of the fact that one is aware. Consciousness operates as a regulatory field for behavior and is intimately related to action. Coleman, 1969. To be self-aware, self-knowing, that is, to be aware of and in some degree in control of our own motives and feelings, is to be self-controlling. Pardon me. To possess the ability to exercise voluntary control over our own behavior. High levels of self-knowledge and self-awareness facilitate high levels of self-control, control over impulses. The ability to delay action and gratification enables the undertaking of constructive and critical analysis and adaptive readjustment of one's own behavior. Facilitates the routine and creative use of symbols to actively guide thinking and communication, as well as to systematically and rationally solve problems. Low levels of self-awareness and self-knowledge bring about the opposite effects. In some, self-knowledge or self-consciousness equals individual self-control. Example, the relative gain of power over his own behavior by the individual himself. Other consciousness, example, where the level and character of individual consciousness is determined by others through social conditioning, through the creation and manipulation of powerful unconscious drives and motives by others, equal control by others, the relative loss of self-control, the exercise of an inordinate, possibly harmful amount of power over the individual by others. Thus, consciousness is about power, whether as generated and exercised by oneself and or by others. It is the medium by which the individual and others control his state of being and behavior to the degree that others shape and direct the individual's consciousness to that degree is his state of being. Let me repeat that. Thus, consciousness is about power, whether it's generated and exercised by oneself and or by others. It is the medium by which the individual and others controls his or her state of being and behavior. To the degree that others shape and direct the individual's consciousness, to that degree is his or her state of being and behavior under their control. To the degree that the individual shapes and directs his or her own consciousness, to that degree is his or her state of being and behavior under his or her control. In sum, consciousness is an instrument of social control and power. It is the means by which personal and social behavior is controlled. Hence, the society and culture, particularly those who represent and exercise societal and cultural authority, seek to shape and direct the consciousness of each of the society's and culture's members in ways which maintain their integrity and advance their interests. It is through its shaping and directing of individual consciousness that the society achieves control or power over individual and social behavior. The socially shaped and directed individual's consciousness thereby becomes the society's instrument of social control. Listen, the individual empowers the society to control him or her when he or she cedes or surrenders the creation and direction of his or her consciousness to the virtual, complete, unquestioned, unopposed control of others who represent the society to him or her. It is very important to keep in mind that what we have said here, as it applies to individual consciousness, also applies without qualification to group consciousness. And group consciousness, that is the central subject of our discussion herein. Helpful to the reader's understanding of our objectives and meanings would be to automatically translate references of individual consciousness to mean group consciousness as well. So what does he have here for us? The realm of alert consciousness, the primary source of individual and social power. Consciousness refers to a level of physiological and psychological arousal which permits the individual to be conscious or aware of his or her internal and external environments and facilitates his or her ability to regulate his or her cognitive and behavioral capabilities toward achieving goals he or she finds desirable. Consciousness is a type of active intelligence. By that, it is an adaptational force which utilizes instinctual, habitual, innovative, inventive, and creative approaches in responding to various environmental demands and incentives. Because of its ability to bring about mental, social, and physical change in both the individual's internal and external circumstances, consciousness may be perceived as the fundamental and essential form of human power. Let me read that part again. That was deep. Consciousness may be perceived as the fundamental and essential form of human power. Now, I know this, but I love the way that he's breaking it down. But I really only know it because of teachers like him. How much power it represents, the nature and outcome of its influence on the individual's internal and external worlds depend on its level of arousal, organizational, and functional state. The organizational and functional state of consciousness, which determine the impact it will have on the world, depends on the interactive relations between three of its major componential factors: its factual experiential contents, mental behavioral instrumentalities, and directional organizational orientations. Maybe I should repeat that because I know I hesitated a little throughout that. The organizational and functional state of consciousness, which determine the impact it will have on its world, depends on the interactive relations between three of its major componential factors: its factual experiential contents, mental behavior instrumentalities, and directional organizational orientations. The functional elements of consciousness, how African consciousness is disempowered and empowered. Listen up, family. Consciousness is characterized and determined by its contents, instrumentalities, and directional organizational factors. Factual experiential contents: perceived and factual knowledge, beliefs, attitudes, opinions, temperament, conditioned behavioral and emotional tendencies, unconscious motives and drives, self-perception, worldview, current perception of internal and external environments. These broad classes or types of contents, stable personality traits, and tendencies are the basis for determining the general character orientation of human behavior. Mental behavioral instrumentalities. These are physical skills, personal social skills, intellectual, cognitive, reasoning, intuitive, critical, analytical, problem solving skills, etc. Abilities, academic skills, occupational skills, learning skills. Major kinds of intellectual and behavioral skills are utilized to process or operate the factual, experiential contents of consciousness and to behaviorally express the outcome of that process or operation. Directional organizational orientations, needs, desires, values, interests, aspirations, ideas, sense of purpose, culture. These factors are used to decide what problems need to be solved and what goals are to be pursued. They heavily influence which contents and which instrumental methods of processing those contents and modes of expression will be used by the individual to achieve particular ends or to solve particular problems. The disempowerment and empowerment of African consciousness. In resolving problems, creating new or innovative possibilities, and adapting to environmental demands, the conscious individual one applies one or more of the instrumentalities of his consciousness to process its contents under the guiding influence of one or more of his directional organizational orientations or values, and two, uses the outcome of his mental behavioral processes to direct and regulate his mental and physical behavior in order to achieve some intended result. How is African consciousness disempowered by white power? Well, white power seeks to disempower African consciousness by adversely falsifying, limiting, or manipulating its contents and or impairing or constricting its instrumentalities and or misdirecting its directional organizational orientations under the guiding influence of self-serving European-centered values. How is African consciousness empowered by Black power? Black power seeks to empower African consciousness by expanding the factual knowledge base of its contents and making its factual and other contents functionally relevant to resolving the problems of African peoples, maximally enhancing and expanding its instrumentalities, and by bringing both its contents and instrumentalities under guiding influence of African-centered directional organizational orientations or values. Values as instruments of control. Values as a key factor in the individual's orientation towards him or herself and his or her world, regulate and direct consciousness. Values are the standards by which we determine what is preferable, appropriate, important, good, desirable, or what ought to be. They help us to regulate and direct our behavior. They give meaning to behavior. Valuing involves the making of choices which not only operationally influence behavioral activities, but significantly helps to shape the type of life the individual builds for him or herself and the kind of person he or she becomes. However, values in tandem with the consciousness which they help to guide and direct are instruments for controlling behavior. Moreover, values, like consciousness, are socialized in that they are experiences undergone by the individual, as well as the social environment in which he or she currently operates. Therefore, the degree of self-control an individual or group exercises under the influence of values is related to the degree to which his or its operative values are intrinsically or extrinsically generated and activated. To the degree that the values Blacks use to determine their own behavior are originated and controlled by whites is the degree that Black behavior falls under white control, is the degree whites retain and exercise social power over Blacks, is the degree Blacks are powerless relative to whites. This allows whites to socially control the behavior of Blacks while Blacks believe themselves in control. Black power requires that Blacks originate their own values and that those values be exercised by them in their own interests. Remember, I keep saying what Wade Nobles taught me. Power is the ability to define your reality and have other people adopt your definition of it as if it's their own. A lot of us have adopted their definition, and we're giving them power because we're allowing them to define our words and our reality. It is not their job, and that is not something that we're supposed to just embrace. We're supposed to always think critically and question everything, especially from people that are not like us, that don't look like us, that don't value what we value, and have not gone through what we've gone through and have done nothing to make it better. Cultural values are means by which a cultural group achieves and retains self-control, control regulated and directed by its own values. Culture is a form of social control, and as such is a form of social power, a means by which a people gain power over themselves and their behavior in order to achieve certain desired ends. In this light, it is not difficult to infer that to achieve deep and practical social control, social power over blacks, dominant whites had to deculturate blacks. And I mean, strip them of their original African cultures, languages, consciousness, and values in order to instill in them a new subordinate culture and cultural values compatible with white economic and social interests. Money follows values. We pay for what we value. Africans must value things European, things manufactured and marketed by Europeans, thereby enriching and empowering Europeans while impoverishing and disempowering themselves. The degree to which Africans value things African, things manufactured and marketed by Africans, they enrich and empower themselves. Thus, to the degree that the operational values which determine African behavior are truly African centered, to the degree that Africans become self controlling, self empowering, and will be liberated from European domination and exploitation. Let me read that again. Thus, to the degree that the operational values which determine African behavior are truly African centered, to that degree, Africans become self controlling, self empowering, and will be liberated from European domination and exploitation. The character and strength of consciousness is structured, defined, motivated, and directed by sets of values, needs, desires, interests, tastes, emotional tendencies it contains within itself. Therefore, the white power establishment seeks to determine the character and strength of black behavioral achievement by its skillful and self-serving manipulation of the values, emotions, needs, and such which influence, regulate, and determine the direction and functionality of black consciousness. The ability of individual consciousness to have an impact on and to change its relations to its world and thereby change the social order is founded on good part on the adjunctive use his consciousness makes of its cognitive and intellectual faculties. Whenever I say his, just know that I'm saying his and her. So that's why you see me giving a play on words, because I know a lot of times books wrote by men or women reflect their thoughts and they're going to use their pronoun. I'm speaking to the black family, to the black nation, and to our black selves. So just always substitute the word for what fits. Thank you. Hence, the white power establishment seeks to effectively impair or misdirect the development and functionality of those faculties in blacks in order to misdirect and weaken the consciousness of African peoples and consequently impair their ability to revolutionize the racial status quo. All of the disempowering manipulations of black consciousness by white supremacy establishment are powerfully aided and abetted, even legitimated by its pervasive promulgation of racial myths designed to not only to induce in blacks a diffuse sense of racial inferiority, but to also induce in them the belief that the character and relative powerlessness of the states of consciousness which they characterized them under white oppression, states of consciousness deliberately and purposely created and manipulated by dominant whites, represent their inherent, innate, God-given consciousness. Thus, blacks are induced to believe that what is what has to be. Not at all. Once the inducement takes hold and is identified with by blacks, their consciousness becomes possessed by a set of white fabricated predispositions, dispositions, and tendencies which incline them to act and react in ways that bring them into an unconscious collusion with whites and perpetuating their own domination and exploitation. So now you're starting to see how this is all building up and how it's all adding up, how they stripped us of our language, of our culture, and then they forced an entirely different culture that was subordinate, right, and influences us to support their interests at all times through everything that we do, especially going through their school system. That's the first way. You can never let your enemy, you gonna let your enemies teach your babies? They ain't gonna teach them how to liberate themselves. They're gonna teach them how to maintain order and to respect them to keep them in power, period. Group consciousness. If the sets of values, modes of thinking, beliefs, and much more which define and direct an individual's consciousness are shared by or are compatible with other individuals who mutually consider themselves to be the members of a distinct group, who socially and behaviorally interact in order to achieve mutually desired ends, who initiate and regulate their individual behavior interests in accordance with interests of the group of which they are members, who identify many of their personal interests with interests of the group of which they are members, and who see membership in their group as vitally important to achieving both personal and group aims, then it may be inferred that they have generated and sharing group consciousness. To the degree that such groups have been formed as the result of a shared or common social history, a shared common ancestry and ethnicity, have been socialized according to the same or similar social practices as prescribed by the same or similar institutions, have been trained and motivated to act and interact in ways which maintain and advance the interests of the larger society, it can be inferred that they participate in sharing a cultural consciousness. A group or culture that shares a common consciousness empowers both itself and its individual members. This common consciousness facilitates the achievement of many of the ends desired by both the group and its individual members, which would be difficult or impossible for either to achieve if such consciousness did not operationally exist. Thus, both individual power and group power are markedly and mutually extended and enhanced by the operational presence of a group consciousness. To the degree that a group's consciousness is relatively narrow and flexible or labile, Labile, conflicted or ambivalent, its social power is diminished and its ability to assert its will and realize its interests in the world is also commensurately diminished or dysfunctional. Group consciousness is an adaptational tool, a means the group uses to adapt to environmental demands and adapting the environment to its demands. The presence of group consciousness motivates otherwise exclusively self-interested individuals to cooperatively coordinate and organize their activities as a group toward the achievement of goals they find mutually desirable. The stronger or more powerful the group consciousness, the more likely the group is to achieve its aims. Group consciousness is necessary to the self-determination and autonomy of a group and in maintaining its cohesiveness in the face of opposition from other groups. The strength of group consciousness, the degree to which the members of a group are loyal to its values, committed to its survival and enhancement, and the degree to which the members of a group can work together to defend the group against the negative intentions of others and achieve its aims depends on the degree to which its members are proudly aware of their membership in a group, are esteemed to be identified by others and themselves as members of the group, and are revered of the group, embraced it in high esteem, and are committed to enhancing its social status and power relative to other groups. The power of a group is weakened or destroyed to the proportion its members A, are ashamed of being members of it, B, wish to deny their membership in it, C, crave membership in a rival group, D, do not hold themselves to their group in high esteem, E, are alienated or psychologically separated from or resist identifying with the group, its history and culture, ethnic and or social characteristics, because they seem incompatible with the standards of other groups whom they esteem more highly than their own, and whose acceptance, recognition, and approval are considered more important than those of their own group. F, have failed to develop their personal potential cognitive, social, and occupational skills for the benefit of themselves and their group because their unwanted or embarrassing membership in it has destroyed their confidence and their ability or need to do so. And G, if they have developed themselves within severe limits and their skills only as a means of gaining employment by and or the acceptance of a rival group. I'm gonna pause right there. You know how many people that I just spoke to? It didn't speak to me because I've been Black my whole life. I never wanted to be anything other than Black or African. And if I had to choose again how to come back here, I would be Black or African. I would not be anything else. Not at all. Because that's who I am. That's who I will always be forevermore. But a lot of us really think that these other groups are so much better. They want to be anything other than African and don't even realize what I want to know is, are you that way because you want to be accepted, because you want to fit in? I need you to know something. When you come into adulthood, you got to realize this ain't high school, fam. This is not high school. This ain't college. This ain't grammar school. You do not have to fit in. You're not supposed to fit in. You're supposed to fit in with your people. So y'all supposed to have similar interests, but you're not always supposed to be you don't always have to have the exact same idea. Like I said, I know a lot of people who I know will not read history or will only go back so far in history because they want to prove that they a member of this tribe or this set or came from this part of the world, and won't reflect on that the same places that they talking about, the people that were their elders that became their reason for saying that they're X, Y, and Z, their elders, the people that taught them, came from Africa. Their roots are in Africa. If you do a blood test, they're going to have the same amount of 70% blood from West Africa, East Africa, South Africa. These same people. And I honestly believe it's because they don't even realize that they hate themselves and their group. They want to be everything other than African, and it ain't nothing to be. There's nothing greater than being Black or African. Nothing. Nothing. You need to embrace it. You need to embrace it and love it. Do we all have some failed moments in history as a people? Yeah, we do. But you're not the sum of your failures. And a lot of your failures prepared you the solid foundation to be successful. But you won't know that if you don't study. If you're easily defeated, you won't even recognize that. So I'm just saying, encourage your fellow man and woman to embrace us. When you see brothers and sisters like yourself, don't assume, or even like people that you've met before, if they look like people that you met before, don't assume that these people are, pardon me, your enemy, are against you. No. You know, when I see brothers and sisters in the streets asking for dollars and stuff like that, I remember when I was homeless. I remember when I didn't have $1 to spare. I remember when I was sleeping at somebody else's house and I probably was sleeping on the floor. Man, you better take a cup of humble tea every morning when you get up. This, success isn't promised. You got to earn that. And if you're a Black person, you got to work sometimes 20 to 50 more times harder than everybody else. My word. So when I see them, I see the moments of weakness in my history and how I would wish somebody could have helped me with something. And sometimes I did get some help. So I look out. You know how like the church always be like, pay your tithe and offering. My tithe and offering go to my people. Yeah. Yeah. My church is Black consciousness and African consciousness. That's my church. Because at the end of the day, man, just go ahead and read Race First and look all over the earth. What you see happening. Like I said, remember I said they got that NAFTA agreement, and you won't find any country relative to Africanness, whether it be in South America, the Caribbean, North America, or Africa, or anywhere else in the world. You won't see not one of those African nations in those treaties. So if everybody else is linking up to keep us economically insufficient, what must we do? Do you think us arguing and not spending money with one another, not building together, not protecting one another, not sticking together in spirit, body, and mind, do you think that's helping us, or is that helping them? Remember, I go back to the European holidays. I always ask, who getting paid? Okay, you might be having some nice memories, but you buying more food than you would accustomed to be. And you spending more money than you would accustomed to be. Do you know what would happen right now if Black people just said, we done with all of these European holidays and we only going to celebrate our own? Multiple things would happen. One, They don't know what they're gonna do with it because they people will still participate, so they'll make some money. But we the larger spenders. Yeah, we the largest spenders. It ain't that we ain't got money. We don't spend our money on making more money. We spend our money on things that depreciate in value as soon as we buy them. Gucci and hair. And man, we can grow hair. We can create our own clothes. I don't even know if y'all know, but was it Gucci or was it Louis Vuitton? They had a zoo. And in that zoo, they exhibited prisoners of war, black people. They exploited us as animals and exhibits for shows. Y'all notice that it's only one type of people on earth that did that? No other type of people on earth ever did that. Stop trying to be like your oppressor. Stop trying to be like your enemy. Stop trying to assimilate and try to get them to morally feel you. They ain't never felt you. Everything that they do is to maintain their power. Even those that unconsciously aren't even aware that that's what they do. Stop inviting them to the party, man. We need our own space. Stop inviting them to the backyard. I do understand that there are some of us that already have children with them and things of that nature. So in essence, I'm not going to say what I'm not even speaking to you right now. I'm speaking to the brothers and sisters who have been committed. Like for me, I've been committed to black women my whole life and will always be. And I know black women that have been committed to black men all their life and will always be. We have to stick together. Period. Ain't no sense to keep playing. And what's really crazy, we really need to let our children know. Right now, do you see what children are doing in school? Right now, if they doing this at an early age and they thinking, oh, I'm gonna get something exotic. Everything other than your own is exotic. Don't you know that the black woman is the mother of civilization, queen of the universe? It don't get no more exotic than her. I'm sorry. They wanted you not to believe that. But look at her skin. You could get lost just looking at her skin. You go and look at some of these other people's skin, and you should be alerted. Why they skin so pale? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Why are they so colorless? Yeah. You prefer black or white TV or you prefer color? Stop playing with me. All right, let me get up into this, man. Where was I? I don't remember where I left off at. Mm. I'm gonna have to start here because I think that's where I stopped at. White consciousness versus black consciousness. As a form of intelligence, consciousness is the central instrument for human problem solving activities, for guiding the types of interactions we have with ourselves, others, and the environment. It determines the effects we have on the world, and conversely, the effect the world has on us. It is therefore a power because it can enable and facilitate the achievement of certain ends, because it can create motivation and inform assertive and defensive behavior. Hence, because of its power to determine human social power relations, the control of consciousness is a primary objective of interpersonal and intergroup interactions. Because consciousness is instrumental to the achievement of certain ends, one individual or group often strives to shape and control the consciousness of the other as a means for helping to achieve its own goals. This almost invariably occurs when one person or group has inordinate power over another, or where one group or person is inordinately, pardon me, inordinately dependent on another person or group. Such has been and still is the case with white and black group relations. Consequently, The consciousness of blacks, because it is shaped and utilized as an instrument of white power, exhibits a required restrictiveness of range, shallowness of depth, and overriding level of emotional reactionariness. The underdevelopment and underutilization or misdirected use of a variety of modes of thinking, reasoning, logic, and creativity, and the limited breadth and depth of intragroup identity, mutual concern, love, loyalty, cohesiveness, and solidarity. White power, black consciousness. The relative powerlessness and nature of black consciousness as the reactionary product of white-black power relations is operationally created through the sabotaging and manipulation of the fundamentals of black consciousness through their social and educational conditioning by whites. Since the power of consciousness is related to its available fund and accuracy of knowledge, whites have determined the strength and potential of black consciousness by deliberately supplying it with operational non-knowledge or ignorance, inappropriate, inadequate, or otherwise faulty knowledge. The strength and behavioral character of black consciousness depends on its accurate perception of and its willingness to directly confront and come to terms with reality. Consequently, in order to weaken and misdirect black consciousness, whites, through obscuring and misdefining reality by associating its discovery by blacks with social rejection and with other forms of punitive and painful consequences, have induced in many blacks a compelling need to also obscure and misdefine reality, to chronically seek to escape from it, and to accept the self-serving depiction of reality by whites as valid. The power of whites as a group that dominate and exploit blacks as a group is primarily due to their manipulative inculcation in blacks of the belief in the mythology of individualism, the belief in the purely autonomous, detached, self-defined, self-centered individual who rejects all group identities and loyalties. More important, white power over blacks rests on the ability of whites to create and provoke in black feelings of shame, to create and provoke in blacks feelings of shame, inferiority, low self-esteem, and all manner of negative feelings because they are members of a race negatively stigmatized by whites to begin with. These efforts on the part of whites have successfully induced in a critical number of blacks on the psychological attributes which characterize a weakened group or inadequate group consciousness. Black powerlessness flows from these deliberately created and sustained psychic assaults on black consciousness perpetrated by the social machinations of white supremacist establishment. No amount of individual achievement or the gaining of personal acceptance by whites on the part of black individuals will remove from them the stigma of their membership in a powerless race. It will not truly enhance their personal power or freedom. The fact that they have to deny an intrinsic part of their being and identity to achieve success and white approval means that a crucially important part of on their full humanity has to be negated, that their authentic sense of power and efficacy, their need to be loved unconditionally, remains achingly unfulfilled. It connotes that they are isolated and defenseless because they must reject the ability of their group to protect and shelter them in times of social and personal upheavals, that their power is counterfeited, delegated power, conditionally, tenuously, and arbitrarily based on the willingness to ally themselves with whites in their genocidal assault against the interests and lives of their African brethren whose fellowship they disdain. The racially isolated African individual will learn too late that he cannot aid and abet the destruction of his former race without ultimately aiding and abetting his own personal destruction. Let me repeat that for the people in the back that didn't hear it, that's in denying. The racially isolated African individual will learn too late that he cannot aid and abet the destruction of his former race without ultimately aiding and abetting his own personal destruction. Herschel Walker and those that are like. Black power will be achieved and become a most potent power in the world to the degree that disempowering ideologies, propaganda, and social conditioning techniques employed by the white supremacist consciousness and the negative feelings and tendencies they actively invoke are compellingly refuted and neutralized by black themselves. Let me repeat that. Black power will be achieved and become a most potent power in the world to the degree that disempowering ideologies, propaganda, and social conditioning techniques employed by the white supremacist consciousness and the negative feelings and tendencies they actively invoke are compellingly refuted and neutralized by blacks themselves. This can be fully achieved only by the reinstitution in blacks of an African-centered identity and group consciousness. This can only be achieved when blacks proudly accept who they in reality are, when they accept themselves as Africans and willingly act under the influence of that acceptance to enhance the power and prestige of African peoples everywhere. The disempowerment of African consciousness occurred when it ceased to be African centered, when it was set adrift from its African moorings based on a basic knowledge and practice of African history and culture. The disempowerment of African consciousness and of African peoples will continue as long as they deny their inherent Africanness, that they are African human beings, not just abstract, identityless human beings, as long as they are utterly dependent on other peoples for self-definition, self-perception, for their bread of life, as long as they cannot make themselves believe that they have it within themselves, within their culture, to do for themselves and to equal or subdue the power of any other people, as long as they believe the fantasy that they shall be accepted as equals by whites, shall be integrated into some mythical, raceless, classless society in the near future, or believe that they are hopelessly left behind the leading races of humankind, as long as they do not take responsibility for the creation of their own consciousness. The realization of African consciousness, and I'm going to end it here. African consciousness will realize its full power second to none when it dedicates itself exclusively to the advancement and satisfaction of African interests before all others, Ashe. When it bases its organization on a realistic and truthful knowledge of African history and culture, Ashe. A truthful knowledge of the history, culture, intentionalities, and powers of the enemies or would-be enemies of African peoples, Ashe. When it acquires a solid and courageous knowledge of reality and self, Ashe. When it becomes determined to achieve self-control, high self-esteem, Ashe. When it achieves self-acceptance and develops its ability to form more affirmative, affectionate, cooperative intra-group relations, when it produces to and for its own satisfaction, Ashe, when it organizes itself to overcome and overthrow white supremacy and successfully defend African peoples against the depredations of other ethnic groups, Ashe. A sense of purpose organizes consciousness and motivates it to develop the required abilities and relations to achieve desired goals. Ashe. The more intense its purpose, the more is consciousness compelled to develop the mental and social faculties required to achieve its purposive ends. Ashe. If the central purposes which organize African consciousness are the lowly ones of futilely seeking to gain the acceptance and love of Africans by whites and other ethnic groups, to be employed and cared for by others instead of being self-employed and caring for self, to continue to be dependent on others for their survival and sustenance, then African consciousness and its adjunctive African power, the black power, to a powerful black consciousness runs through the reclamation by African peoples of their African identity and their irresistible will to be the determiners of their own ultimate destiny. With that being said, I hope your today is great and your tomorrow is greater. Tomorrow or later today, we'll talk about self-concept and power. At all times, race first. Pardon me. Race first all the time. And at all times, race first.